So what were you saying? You did a COVID haircut here? What happened? I don't want
I thought, I thought that was off the record, but since you went there and I opened myself up to it, yeah, I still have a lot of trepidation about doing the normal activities that we all took for granted pre-COVID. And I thought, at the same time, I could save myself a little money. And the last time I gave myself a haircut with the Clippers, it wasn't too bad. I actually escaped without, a lot of damage. But unfortunately, this past weekend, my wife was out with the kids. They went to the beach for the day, and I thought, this is a good quiet time to get a haircut and get the Clippers back out again and see if I can improve upon my work the last time. And unfortunately, Mike, the Clippers, I lost control. The Clippers took over, and I had two choices: either shave it down with a military style cut down to the level 1, or just shave it all off. So I thought I would go to the level 1 with a couple of bald spots here and there.
Well, you were the broadcaster at Navy for a long time, so you talk about military.
Yeah, closest I will ever get to military service.
Right. That's great. I remember just from way back seeing you there when I was doing Delaware back in the day. We were just always so excited to go there because that was the step up game, for Delaware up to the the next level. Fortunate to win a few of them there too, by the way. But what a dream, really. I think I've always admired what you've done and the job that you have, because I've been a huge Boston fan my whole life. You know what I mean? So I grew up in Vermont, and it was always been a Red Sox, Patriots, Bruins, Celtics fan. And I have to deal with everybody giving me a hard time about the Patriots because they think I have to tell them no. I used to go when they stunk and they were at the old Foxborough Stadium in like the 80s and 90s, when nobody was there and they were terrible, So I think I'm definitely spoiled now at this point.
It's funny. I'm spoiled for sure because I've been on the job for 7 seasons now, entering my 8th. And I've had the opportunity to call a playoff game in every one of those seasons, an AFC championship in 6 of the 7, and a Super Bowl in 4 of the previous 7, including 3 championships, and all of them have been championships decided in really dramatic fashion, including the 2 greatest comebacks in Super Bowl history. And I try not to take it for granted, and one of the best ways to do that is to go back to my Navy days when I was in a stretch of calling 30 losses in a span of 33 games. And that was in a period when Delaware would probably come in to Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium as a favorite. And I think maybe the last time that I saw you at a Navy-Delaware game, the Blue Hens put up 59 points behind Joe Flacco and beat the Midshipmen a week before Navy wound up beating Notre Dame for the first time in 43 years. But again, I try to relate my good fortune with the Patriots to what I experienced at Navy, going from one extreme to the other. And during those lean times for the Mids, you took a lot of pride in the rewards of being around a military institution, a service academy, and how special it was to be there to call the games. And with the Patriots, I try not to take for granted just how special it's been to broadcast for a team with so much success, watching all-time greats on the sideline, on the field, although one of them, in fact, 2 of them, are now playing with another team down in Florida. And, your experience resonates in particular because I've heard that from a lot of fans here. They always tell me, you have no idea what it was like to be at old Foxborough Stadium on the bleachers and endure those losing seasons way back when. And I hope I don't find out before too long. But I do try to cling to those words and what you just said about, being a faithful fan through thick and thin. And, young generations today know nothing about that.
No, they don't. They don't at all. And yeah, I remember those days. You bring up with Flacco. That was 2007. Went to play for a national championship at the FCS level that year. Of course, I think it was Appalachian State. It was just on a tear, and they destroyed them, to be honest with you. But yeah, those are fun years. Those I'll never forget those days either. So I think you and I are kind of like that. Even a lot of people now that we've gotten a little bit older, but we don't forget where we came from and all the times and the people that you got to work with. Like that was what made those jobs special, I think. It's just the trips and the people and the fun times.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the cool things about being with the team, it's not only the team you cover, but it's the team you're a part of in the broadcast booth. And in the case of traveling with a college, in a lot of ways, there's an extension of that team from the radio crew, at least from my experience, to the video crew, the guys who film all the football practices and all the games, the sports information staff, the people that work so hard behind the scenes. And my favorite part of Navy trips, honestly, were the Friday nights. We would call them happy hours, when the whole staff would get together and go out for dinner, and then hang around and have a few drinks, and have a lot of laughs and tell a lot of stories. And when I traveled in minor league baseball, often it was the camaraderie that I shared with colleagues from around the league, and in other opportunities that I've had, it's been very similar. The games are great. Obviously, that's what we're in it for. Trying to describe what we see on the field, and make an impression on Saturdays and Sundays when it comes to college football and the NFL. But I think a lot of the best part of it is similar to what you hear from players when they retire, when they're traded. They always talk about missing the guys in that locker room. And I think for me, when I look back on that experience in Navy, as great as it was to call those games for the midshipmen, Army, Navy in particular, it's just the people. There's so many great people around there who love the institution so much. And in many cases, they've been there for a very, very long time, and they really appreciate the job that I was trying to do. And I certainly enjoyed and appreciated what they were doing.
Well, that's the thing. When you have a group that's there for a long period of time, and it's like a family atmosphere, I had that when I was doing Delaware games on the radio for sure. And then I think now with being with the Patriots, which you are, I mean, that's what I think's made them so successful as well, too. I mean, there hasn't been a lot of turnover, you know what I mean? There's the ownership and the coaching staff, the players. I mean, that's what's so awesome about it, is that it just gets better and better because you have such a group and the way they run it, that you can plug in new people and you don't even know who they are. Then all of a sudden they become stars. And it's just been great. I don't think a lot of teams understand that because they got so many changes. So by the time you figure it out, then he's gone. It's almost like those great college teams with players that, leave after 1 or 2 years. You just don't develop the consistency. But certainly the Patriots have been able to do that. So that's what's, I think, made them so good. Do you agree?
Yeah, no question. I think it starts at the top for sure with the ownership, the Krafts. Robert Kraft took over as a longtime fan. I think that was a very important part of the success of the team. He wasn't someone who saw the Patriots as an investment opportunity. You have a lot of situations in professional sports, including, frankly, with one of the major sports teams here, where ownership is not necessarily rooted locally. The Bruins owner often takes on criticism because of the fact that he's based in Buffalo, for an example. When you look at the Patriots, Robert Kraft is someone who grew up going to Patriots games. He was a longtime season ticket holder, and he bought the stadium before he purchased the team. It was his essential inroad to purchasing the team and saving the franchise, number one, most importantly, keeping James Orthwein from moving the team to St. Louis. It was Robert Kraft and Stan Kroenke who eventually bought the Rams, who were I think the two finalists. Jeffrey Lurie was in there as well, the owner of the Eagles, when Kraft bought the team. So he was someone who was invested personally. It was his family history, taking his sons to the games as a season ticket holder. But then beyond that, he's a very smart businessman, and just with incredible intellect, but also an ability to learn and a flexibility to adapt. He took over with Bill Parcells. Parcells had really changed the culture of the team on the field. As you know, Mike, the Patriots had success. They got to the Super Bowl and lost to the Packers. And of course, Parcells left in a situation that people here are still very bitter about, the way that marriage ended. It was certainly one that was not amicable for a period of time. Parcells uttering the line, if you're going to cook the dinner, you want to shop for the groceries, and of course interviewing during the week of the Super Bowl and entertaining the offer from the Jets eventually to move on and not flying back with the team, et cetera, part of the history. So Robert Kraft kind of learned from that experience. Pete Carroll came in and Kraft played more of a hands-on role in the decision-making with the football team. And I think he learned from that experience too. So with both of those coaching tenures, Parcells and with Pete Carroll, Robert Kraft took the best of both of those experiences for him as an owner, and he eliminated the worst of it. And he hired Bill Belichick, and he gave Belichick control over football operations. And Belichick rewarded him in his second year with that Super Bowl championship. And a big part of it for the Patriots ever since has been the continuity of having Belichick here in place. He built a farm system, if you will, of personnel people and coaches, so that when one coach would move on to another job, Charlie Weiss or Romeo Crennel, there was some young coach who was already in the pipeline and could eventually take over those duties. And we've seen that here in recent years. In the NFL, there's turnover constantly on the field, but the Patriots have established continuity with their coaching staff. And then beyond that, I think the culture of the organization with Belichick and Kraft, it's a first-class organization. There are certain expectations that never waver inside that locker room. There's a way they do things, a very business-like approach, yet it's one that's very successful. There are players in that locker room that have been there for a long time who are able to instill that culture in their teammates when new guys come in. And if you don't fit in, you don't last long. And I think that's a big part of it for the Patriots as well. It's a word you hear a lot when people try to come in and rebuild an organization, culture, but it takes time. And the Patriots have had that, I think, because of the continuity, the long-term stability with Belichick as the head coach. But again, that's born out of the experience I think Robert Kraft had as the owner, having learned from what didn't go well with Bill Parcells and where Pete Carroll in his tenure for the Patriots and the personnel staff faltered there.
Well, and you know this because you're more involved with the program, as is my good friend who I know you obviously work with a lot, is Mike Reese, covers the team and all that. So I talked to him a little while back too. And I just want to hear your take on this, because I like to use the line, and, people know it, Monday morning quarterback, it's like, once you know the result and you say, oh, we should have done this, almost like with everything we're dealing with now, it's like, well, we didn't know, you know what I mean? And when Belichick makes that decision in year two that no, Tom Brady's going to stay as our starter. And believe me, I love Drew Bledsoe, and, I felt bad the way it all worked out. I mean, but it's like, obviously Monday morning quarterback, we know how it played out. So of course it was the right move. I'm just saying, I loved Bledsoe. That's great. Bill made the right call. You mentioned it, Kraft allowed him to make the call, and that's where, we are today. But I just think it was brilliant. And what I love about Belichick, but I don't think people understand, so I want to get your take on this, is that I feel like, him in the post game and the press conferences and the way he speaks and all that stuff, I don't want to say, but I do say it's like an act. It's like he knows, he understands like what he's doing. And I looked at it one time and I kind of like went through it all and said, all right, let me analyze what he's doing here, as opposed to just what everybody thinks is pissing off reporters and not giving them the answers to their questions. He doesn't sell anything. He doesn't have to convince you of anything, right? He doesn't, give too much information, obviously. He doesn't give you anything to misconstrue. All the things that he does in those in press conferences and what he says is less is more. It doesn't give, anybody other noise. I mean, I don't know. I just like it. It would suck if I'm a reporter or trying to put together the information, but do you agree what he's doing is staged and it's done, for the way he does it and why?
Well, there's a reason Bill says and does everything he does. And it's usually, a reason that in the end justifies the means. I think Bill is someone who, when it comes to reporters who have to break news, who isn't going to give you much. And you're going to get those responses that you often hear and see replayed over and over again, the terse sound bites. In some cases, a demeanor, a comportment at the podium that's very disagreeable. And I think that's what a lot of the people form their perception, their image of Bill Belichick around. But often he's doing that because he's talking to his team. When he builds up an opposing team, for example, on Wednesday of a game week, he'll begin a press conference, and the opponent coming up on Sunday is the best team the Patriots are going to play all year. And he's going to go down the entire roster, every position group, and tell you all the attributes of that particular team. And then when he's asked about various issues related to his team, he's going to be very tight-lipped. And again, you're going to get what most people are familiar with in a Bill Belichick press conference. And I think he's talking to his team in those minutes to focus, to prepare, to play their best the following Sunday. And there's nothing that he can say in the press conference when it comes to questions related to, again, personnel. Who's going to start? Is so-and-so coming back from an injury? What are your thoughts on X receiver's development? There's nothing that he can say in that setting, I think, that he feels can help him win the game by divulging information just to appease the media, just to give us something. I think there are a lot of people out there that do believe that if you give the media stories to write, then you don't have to worry about them finding their own stories to write. Well, I think Bill is a master at controlling what the message is going to be And again, primarily it's directed to his team. But on the flip side of that, Mike, and Mike Reese can certainly attest to this, if you go into the press conference as someone like me in my role gets to do, because I don't have to ask the same questions that all those other reporters need to as part of their job. If someone is on the injury report, I don't have to ask them about that player's status. I'm a play-by-play guy. I'm just trying to get ready for the game, the broadcast on Sunday. So I can ask maybe a question that's related to football strategy in general, or the history of the game, or maybe I want to pose a question about a former coach of a team that the Patriots are about to play. Say it's the Steelers, and you ask them about the influence of Chuck Noll. And 10 to 15 minutes later, you feel like you were sitting in a college lecture hall getting a lecture on football 301. It can be like that with Bill, particularly on Fridays when everything is put to bed in terms of preparation for the upcoming game. And Bill's far more relaxed. The press contingent is thinned out in a typical year. You go on Wednesday and it's jam-packed. We've got an overflow crowd of not only local media, perhaps the largest media contingent in the league, but also the national media. Well, by Friday, that thins out considerably, and Bill knows, okay, these are the regulars. These are the real diehards. They want to learn about football, and he's going to be very expansive in his answers. Those answers aren't going to be replayed on SportsCenter because, you're not going to hear a 10-minute recitation on whether the kick returner should take a line drive kickoff out of the right corner of the end zone when his team is down by 3 points in the fourth quarter. But you're going to get that if you're sitting there in that room. And it's amazing just how much you can learn walking out of a press conference at times. And it's completely contradictory to what most people hear.
Is Bill going to be okay with Cam wearing all the crazy clothing and hats and stuff that he does? Like, is he okay with that?
I got to say, it's kind of funny because certainly Cam's style is a little more flamboyant than Brady's. And I'm going to say a little more because Tom wore some outfits, certainly, in particular at the Met Gala. But, Brady, obviously, with his significant other, Giselle's impact and influence in the fashion world, Tom came to the press conference podiums, often sporting, very flashy clothes. Again, a little more subdued, perhaps, than Cam. But I don't think Bill really cares. What Bill cares about is when Cam goes onto the field, that he's prepared to play the position to help the Patriots win. And it's going to be based on how well he performs. I think it's a misperception about Belichick and the Patriots. The outside impression that inside they don't have fun and they don't enjoy themselves. Players will be allowed to celebrate here. I've seen it in recent years. When a running back scores a touchdown, the running backs group does a celebratory dance. I mean, Gronk, who is, of course, so well known after punctuating his touchdowns with his earth-shattering, earth-shaking spikes. Now, he wasn't allowed to have Brandon Cooks ride on his back coming off back surgery. And that, of course, caught a lot of attention around here. And I think because Bill told Gronk not to do that anymore, that's the impression a lot of people have, even locally, when it comes to celebrations. I don't think Cam's going to have any issues with matters of fashion, his personal taste in hats, and what kind of a corsage he might wear on the lapel of his coat when he comes in, as long as he plays the position as a quarterback who's well prepared and helps the Patriots win games.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it, whatever ends up happening. And I know it's going to just be a weird year no matter what. And then you've probably talked about this till you're blue in the face about, the Brady and the Gronk and how many more times you're going to hear about it. It's like, you know what? I love Brady. I still love him. It's great. 20 years. You're kidding me? I mean, what happens if you and I change a job like we've done before? Nobody gets on us, after whatever it could be, a couple of years, So God bless them. I hope that they do well. I actually, I'm rooting for Tampa Bay unless, we get them in the Super Bowl or something, but good for him. I think, his method and his company too, TB12, have actually been, viewing that and learning a lot of great stuff about eating well and being healthy. And I think it's great. So I'm just, good for him. We'll go from there. We'll see what happens with Cam Stidham, all that stuff. We could talk about that forever. Who knows if we're even going to have the season. So to me, I want to get from you a little bit more on the inside. NFL-wise, not say easier, but as opposed to college football, which we're still trying to figure all out now, you got your one commissioner, your league, your players association. How much, again, I say easier, is it for the NFL to try to make this thing happen and have a season than it would be for college football, the way we're seeing that go on now?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot the last couple of days in particular, as we've seen the reports emerging with regards to the college football season, and after the Mid-American Conference canceled its full season. I think in the NFL, there are a number of factors. You mentioned the central authority. You have the commissioner. You have the Players Association and the league, who, as we saw really in the final hours before preseason started, and actually in the first hours of training camps, they were able to negotiate a set of protocols and the financial parameters under which they'll try to play this season. You have adult men who are compensated very handsomely in most cases, who were able to make informed decisions about their own well-being, comparing the risk factors in their families with themselves, with the risk of trying to play. And we saw, of course, 60-plus players, including 8 Patriots, decide to opt out. You also have a situation where I think in the NFL, when you're getting down to the logistics and those protocols, where I would imagine it's far, I don't want to say easier, but it's much less difficult to have social distancing. You have, when you start an NFL season in a typical year, 53 players on an active roster plus 10 practice squad players. So now those numbers are going to be expanded. You're going to be talking about roughly 70 players in all. And you have a situation with the Patriots where they're not only using the home locker room, but the visiting locker room to maintain social distance between each of those players. Well, in a college football program, at least when I was at the Naval Academy calling games, there were like 150 guys in the program, especially the big state schools. Often you have a lot of walk-ons that are part of the program. It's the 85 scholarship players, but it's more than that. And you also have kids that are coming and going. In some cases, if the schools are returning for on-campus learning in the midst of all their classmates, all their schoolmates. And we have seen, of course, that, in settings like that, they're not the most responsible in a lot of cases when it comes to adhering to what we all need to do to try to get control of this virus. I think in the NFL, you're talking about grown men who are, again, paid very well. It is in their financial interest as well as their health interest. And granted, they're at risk in to some degree, not because of their own actions, but the actions of their families and the people that are around them on a regular basis. But there is some control of that. And you're talking about, I think, fewer people than if you're a Big 10 or a Big 12 student athlete, a college football player, and you find yourself on campus. And I also think just the numbers that we've seen, like testing positive, college programs shutting down their workouts compared to what we've seen in the NFL. It's a much different set of circumstances. In the NFL, it's more of a uniform environment, even though you're talking about 32 teams. It's just better regulated. And in college football, with all those teams, and again, all the different conferences with no central authority, really lacks that, it seems to me.
No, I agree. It's just too much. It's too difficult. And plus, there's school. Like, that's kind of the reason they're there. The most important thing, which everybody just forgets about, is the school even open? Are the players even going to campus? Like, there's too many questions. Like, I mean, like you said, the NFL, if you had to, like what the NBA is doing, you're paid. You can go in the bubble. You can, take 2 or 3 months away if you have to from your family and be safe. And I mean, you're making millions of dollars. So, I mean, I would do that if that needs to be the case, I mean, keep everybody safe, make money and do it the right way and not pick up the virus. So I think, you're right. It's just very difficult in the college landscape. And, go back to what you said a moment ago, which you don't have to deal with anymore, man, is the double numbers, the 100 and something players on the team. And now with the new, like, red shirt rule to have a couple years ago, you could play, Johnny for 4 games and then you don't play him. I mean, we literally have like 100 and something guys available, in a particular game. I was like, man, I would love to do the NFL, where it's like there's 50 guys, 55 guys, everybody's number. Like, I know everybody's number now as it is anyway, and I'm not doing it like the players, even if you weren't a broadcaster such as yourself. I mean, it's just a lot easier. But do you honestly think, again, talking to where it is now and what we know now, that the NFL season starts and finishes, we get the Super Bowl, and it kind of plays out like we would hope it to play out? What do you think?
I'm hopeful. I'm not confident because I think it's difficult to be confident in this environment. What we're seeing, even locally here, for example, Mike, in Massachusetts, we're an area that went through a surge in the spring and seemingly had weathered the worst of the pandemic by June. But we have seen the numbers gradually climb higher and higher, and now we're in a situation, for example, where our kids are getting ready to go back to school, and the school districts are scrambling to try to put together plans, which I think now are heading in the direction of more remote learning, or at least hybrid learning. Whereas a couple of months ago, I think the thought on the part of a lot of people, if not most, was that, the kids will at least be back in school. And that's just, an example from everybody's slice of life here locally. And again, a state that's done fairly well compared to much of the country. And when you look around at states like Texas, and although Arizona, the numbers are going down, and the state of Florida, those are states, California, with, in the case of Florida, Texas, California, with multiple NFL teams. And, I think that the line that Sean Doolittle, the pitcher for the Washington Nationals, uttered at his press conference very early on when baseball marked its return, that sports are the reward for a society and I can't remember the exact phrasing as I speak to you now, but sports are a reward for a functioning society, in essence, is what Sean said. And I think that what we're seeing is that if you play in a bubble like the NBA or the NHL, which has the two bubbles, and you can control the environment, the MLS as well, and some of the other leagues like the Premier Lacrosse League and the Major Women's Soccer League, if you can control that environment, and once you have everybody inside that bubble who has been tested and is negative, and you don't allow the virus to come into that bubble, you're going to finish the season, or at least you're going to stand a great chance. But we've seen with baseball, for example, Marlins and the Cardinals and other teams with players testing positive, guys not abiding by the rules and the protocols, doing things they shouldn't be doing. It's going to be very difficult for the NFL to have a whole season without incidents here or there. I think that there will be a more disciplined approach by the players in this league, I think in part by nature of what they do as football players compared to baseball players who are playing every day. And I've spent 20 years in professional baseball, and I'm not surprised, frankly, by some of what I've seen thus far with the problems Major League Baseball has experienced. But I think it's very, very difficult. So I think you have to prepare yourself, honestly, for perhaps a stutter step kind of season where it begins. And I think they're very determined to play this season. And maybe there will be some interruptions. Maybe there will be games pushed back. What does the NFL do if it can't achieve the competitive balance it always has sought and more or less accomplished? With baseball, a team losing a chunk of games, maybe you can get over that because you're still playing enough games where winning percentage is a good barometer to determine your playoff field. Well, it's hard to do that in football if a team misses a game, much less two or three.
Right. I know there's could be so many other factors that kind of mess the whole thing up for it to be a equal, for everybody. But what does like an NFL bubble even kind of look like or sound like? I mean, is that everybody going to one particular place? Can that even happen? Or like, what would you say the organization has to do to kind of mirror that of the NBA per se without almost bringing everybody to one spot? Can that even be possible? Like, what's that?
I think that's, next to impossible for 32 teams. Now, maybe you get to some point during the season where they're able to convince enough people to do that. Some teams, for example, I think the Saints were the first, and other teams have tried to mimic what New Orleans has done. They've essentially rented out a hotel, and they've offered staff and players who want to stay there and be there exclusively to do that. But again, I think with a lot of players, you're talking about fathers and husbands who want to go home to their families. They don't want to be isolated in a bubble from August through January into February. Now, in our case, in the NFL, you have different tiers. You have tier 1 and tier 2, and those are essentially the people that have necessary contact and most frequent contact with the football team, the players. And that ranges from the coaches and the trainers, the medical staffs, to the video people, the nutritionists, the massage therapists, the PR staffs, the social media staffs. And those are the people that will be around the players. And they're going to be tested on a regular basis. They're also going to be fined. And they'll have to pay a price, and a substantial price, if they are found in violation of the protocols. That includes some of our brethren, from what I understand, who will have access as tier 2 employees. I think Mike, you mentioned Mike Reese, who's certainly as good as anybody in this business. I believe Mike is going to be one of the pool reporters for the Patriots. So he's one of the few people who will have, along with the NFL Network, I believe, everyday access, being around the team, being on the field during practices. And the rest of the media contingent is going to be extremely limited. Now, I'll be part of that group, I hope, in tier 3. But we're allowed to enter the facility, but we can't have any contact with the team. We're going to be kept far away. When I say enter the facility, that means walk in the gates of the practice area behind Gillette Stadium and watch the team practice. And then when they're done practicing, it's all virtual. The press conferences, whereas in the past you have a scrum of people, in some cases, 50 to 75 reporters and photographers surrounding, like concentric circles around a player. Brady would have more than that. Now you're going to have people going back to, their cars, or going back, if they can make it in time, going back to their offices or a coffee shop if there was one nearby with Wi-Fi, and logging on so they can talk to the Patriots on a virtual Zoom conference the way you and I are talking.
It's wild, man. I mean, we're definitely going to be looking back at some point and saying, well, I had to do this and this and this when all this was going down, and we don't know when that's going to be. But I know that's going to happen someday. However, I bet you there's going to be a few things that, are going to change. I don't know what those are either, but that might stay that way moving forward. I'm hoping it's more of like actual hygiene and just being better, period, as better individuals, and, washing their hands more, and companies and businesses wiping more stuff down, and people just getting more or getting less of the flu or COVID or whatever it may be, period. Like, I hope those are some of the things, because I know you and I and everybody else doesn't want to like lose that personal interaction and connection we have in doing things, and we like traveling and we like doing that stuff. I just hope it doesn't, alter that for good, some of it, because that would be kind of upsetting for sure.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. Talking about what we do in the NBA and the NHL, for example, our station is the flagship of the Bruins and the Celtics. I think our Bruins crew is calling games from the Celtics locker room at TD Garden. And I'm sorry, the Celtics crew is calling games from the locker room at TD Garden. And the Bruins radio crew is in a makeshift expanded studio in Boston at our radio station. And I'm not sure where Scott Zolak and I will be to call the football games. But the people in the booth, it's going to be the bare minimum. Whereas in the past, we would have a big crew, and we'd have our salespeople bringing in clients, and there'd be lots of people coming in and out of the booth. The TV network next door, their announcers, the visiting radio crew, the national radio crew, all the people that work at the press box, all the stadium security, the people that you see on an every week basis. Kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, the rewards of being around a team. And like other aspects of society, we're not going to experience that this coming year. It's going to be bare minimum. Hopefully we can broadcast from Gillette Stadium for the home games. I think that's the plan, and it looks good. But for road games, I think it's still an unknown in our particular case. But it's not going to be the same. Calling games off a monitor for obvious reasons, and it's not just for what you're lacking by not being at a stadium and hearing a crowd roar and react and just being there in that environment. It's also the simple things that you really, in my case, really relish about the job, and that's walking across the field and seeing, John, the security guard, who's down in the corner of the end zone at Gillette Stadium and works the south end zone. It's Scott, who's the press box attendant, and he's been there at Gillette, going back probably to when the stadium opened, and probably when you were going to Foxborough Stadium, was working over there as well. And it's all those people and the interaction that you have from the time you walk into that stadium early in the morning on a game day until the time you leave. And we're going to be missing that. And so many of us, of course, are missing that in our everyday lives because we're not able to do the things that we've always been able to do and never thought twice about. And now we can't do those things. I hope we get it under control. It's so frustrating to see how, and I don't want to get off on a tangent, how politicized, simple steps. You talked about hand washing, mask wearing, for example, what we could do by simply wearing masks. And that's one of the nice things about, from what I've seen with the NFL, they're embracing it. Belichick was asked last week, what do you have to deal with the safety measures? And he said, it's not overwhelming. We're paying more attention to hand washing and sanitizing and cleaning. A lot more plexiglass. He joked, I'd love to see the plexiglass bill around here. He said, it's wearing a mask. And he said, it's not too inhibiting. And those are words I think that we all should take to heart.
No, I agree. I agree. And then moving forward, we should be washing our hands. We should be, practicing those good hygiene tactics. So hopefully when we do, and then then the plexiglass comes down and the social distancing subsides and all that. But I'm with you. I know we could talk about it forever. Let's hope it gets better sooner rather than later. And hey, man, I just love listening. They're watching highlights, I should say, and hearing your call when they pop that in on Sports Center and stuff. I'm like, that's Bob, and because I'm a huge Pats guy. So I just hope it's a fun year for you no matter what happens. And hey, all the best, though, to you and your family, too, as we all try to just stay safe.
Mike, I really appreciate it. Same to you and yours. And, I want to say, too, I know you're heavily involved in the college seasons, thinking about all the guys like yourself and like me when I was calling the games at that level today, wondering about the future of college athletics, college football, and college basketball in 2020, 21. It's such a tough time for everybody. So I certainly wish you and yours all the very best, and everybody that's part of this fraternity. So many people, right now are in a pretty tenuous spot doing what we do.
No doubt. Thanks, man. We will. We'll be okay. We'll get there. You
All
know
right,
it.
take care.
All right. All the best. Good talking to you.